Welcome to a very special episode of the 1000 Ways to Live podcast. I am Taiwo Olawehinmi, and I'm so excited to be stepping into the role of host of the podcast alongside two incredible co hosts, Marie and Melissa. Today's podcast is indeed about transitions. It's about looking back, paying it forward, and indeed celebrating what's next. I'm excited to share this time and this episode with someone who has played an integral role in shaping the 1000 Ways to Live podcast. I'm joined today by Jacob Straessle, who is one of the voices that brought the podcast from idea to reality alongside his two co hosts, Rihanna and Reed. They created this platform for Owen alumni to share powerful insights, share their career pivots, and indeed share leadership lessons that have impacted a lot of people within Owen and beyond. And aside being a podcast host, Jacob is indeed shaping the game and changing the game, not only behind the mic, but also in the classroom as a communications fellow, and also even in the community, leading change, driving impactful projects through social impact initiatives. And today he will be sharing his journey, sharing his story, and of course, passing the baton. How are you, Jacob?
I'm doing great. That was an incredible introduction. Thank you for all that. I think you're giving me more credit than I deserve.
No, you are the best, Jacob, and it's so good to have you here today and to share the stage with you.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, you said passing the baton last year. I think the first time we met was Mod 1 when I was actually your teaching assistant, right?
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
good to be back, and I'm glad that you're, passing it on to you as a great communications fellow and now fellow podcast host.
Right? That's so cool. You've indeed come. We've indeed come a full circle.
We have. Well, I'm excited to be here today. Thanks again for doing this and for taking over the reins from us.
Yeah, my pleasure. What made you decide to do this? The podcast was a new idea in Owen, and you decided to step in and explore it and build it to what it is now. Why did you decide to take it on? And how has it shaped you, especially as a leader?
Yeah, good question. I mean, just to get started, the idea for me to apply to the podcast originally came just from curiosity, right?
Mm,
It was how can I get to know alums more on a personal level as
mm,
opposed to a business level or a role level? I mean, how many coffee chats did you do? I mean, we've probably done 100 coffee chats where we're all talking to alums. It's almost transactional, or it
mm,
feels transactional, right? Oh, tell me more about your company.
mhm,
Tell me more about that role that I might get.
mhm,
And a lot less of who are you as a person? What are your goals? What are your career trajectories? So to me, when I heard about this podcast and more specifically interviewing people that were between the ages of what, 30 and 50, kind of that middle career group of individuals who have launched their career, but they're not done yet, right? And to me, those are the people that were really interesting to talk to. So when I heard about this podcast and I thought, well, I might as well apply and see, what could come out of it and hopefully get some of those stories. And again, thank you for having me because you're the one doing that now. And the most important aspect of getting these stories shared to, both prospective students, alums, I guess maybe an alum next year, but just in others, it comes from that curiosity and like focusing more on not necessarily the business they're working on, the position they're in, but just who they are as a person. And I think the leadership podcast embodies that perfectly.
So true, so true. And curiosity is such a powerful tool for personal success and, of course, professional success. And I dare say curiosity was one of the reasons why I chose to come on board as well. There is no telling how far one would go when you choose to allow curiosity lead the way
Mm,
in engaging people and learning more about other people and learning more about other ways of life and ways of seeing life. So that's so impressive.
definitely. And I like the way you put that.
So you've interviewed a lot of people from different walks of life,
Mhm.
different industries. What universal leadership insights would you say you've gleaned from all of these people?
Oh gosh, there's been a lot. Let me think. I guess I can break it down into just three of my individual podcasts I did.
Mm,
The first one was with Shake. He's now former Tesla, works in robotics.
mm,
To me, what he came out of it is that managing through uncertainty, being a good decision maker comes from having the correct
mm,
data points, data analysis, and leading with actual information, not
mm,
just based on intuition, but
mm.
actually focusing on the data that gets you there.
Data is life.
Yeah, exactly. Secondly, is Matt Beasley, who spoke about the journey as a point. All these transferable skills that you learn both in undergrad, in the workforce, in MBA programs, those are the ones that matter, right?
Mm,
Because at the end of the day, being able to use your transferable skills, your experiences, and use them for different career trajectories is kind of the point. So, to me, the biggest thing that came out of that was transferable skill set and how you can use that effectively no matter where you are in your organization. And then Brock Hardesty, he's the CFO of the Custom Knives. He spoke a lot about storytelling. And that probably resonated with me the most on a communications level because storytelling is so important. You can have just the financial acumen, you can have the background in that intense technical topic. But if you can't explain it, if you can't talk to different people and get them to understand where you're coming from, to argue your point effectively or just be able to tell a story that's enthralling to sell something, you're not going to lead anybody, right?
mm.
You're not going to be able to actually change much. So between those three, I think the thing that embodies them all is really the communication aspect. It's really important to communicate effectively. And I think that's where a focal point of leadership is and really should be. We learn all these technical skills, but at the end of the day, if you can't apply them properly, then what's the point?
What's the point? And that really ties into the one I was going to speak about next, about how communication can be wielded as an effective tool for leadership. You seem to have done very well for yourself in sharpening your own communication skills as a communication fellow at Owen, also working with FTI Consulting in their financial communications practice. So you are leading the way and speaking the way, so to speak. How do you think leaders can do better with their communication skills? Storytelling, as you have mentioned, is really vital. It's not enough to know the stuff, it's not enough to be competent or excellent at your craft. It's also vital that you're able to communicate, articulate the work that you do. What practical means do you think leaders can explore, especially as young people,
Mhm.
young leaders in the workplace? How can we leverage communication, practically speaking, to do better and amplify our leadership?
Yeah, I mean, just to start off, I want to emphasize that storytelling aspect. Everything that you do could be told in a story,
Hmm.
and you could do that in a way that brings people in. You're not just talking about a product that you have on the shelf. You're telling the story about the brand, the product behind it, right? The
Hmm.
people behind it,
Hmm.
and I think that's important to emphasize, no matter what you're doing. What is the story behind that? And as far as just specific cues or I guess specific instances of communication. Actually shout out to Brian McCann. We just spoke about this in our managerial decision making class, but listening is really important,
Hmm.
right? It's that active listening that we're all so bad at. And I think this podcast does a really good job at yes, you're focusing on that next question, but you're also, you have to take in and kind of do the dance around the communication aspect. And I think that's an important component, not just in this podcast, not just in interviews, but also just in, life in general. You're always doing that dance of active listening, wanting to prove your point, wanting to
Hmm.
talk, and knowing when to talk and knowing when to sit back and just listen is a form of communication itself. And I think I'm personally bad at that. Everyone could be better at active listening. I always want to just jump in with that, next point to prove that I'm listening. But I think it's important. Some of the best, leaders or stories I've heard have come from just leaders taking a step back, listening to everyone in the conference room, and then putting their point forward. And I think it's a really important context.
I totally echo that. Listening is such a vital skill that is underrated. Many people do not understand the value and the power of active listening. And that makes me curious, given your own experience as a
Mhm.
podcast host, what's that one thing that many people didn't realize about being a podcast host?
Oh gosh. I think how long it takes to actually do these things, right? And not to say that our podcasts have the lights, the cameras, all that. We have one webcam and a microphone, But even that, just putting all the steps together and going from initial interview, doing research on the person that you're speaking with,
Mhm.
all the way down to, the background and making sure, kind of like I mentioned, that dance aspect, making sure that back and forth, enough, but not too much where you're waiting for that next question. And I think it's a skill that's learned, and it comes from practice. It's not something, I mean, Bree, Reed, and I, we didn't come being like, oh, we are a great podcast host. What we came with is curiosity. And
Mhm.
I think you guys come with curiosity as well. And I think that's the first step of it. But in terms of, how podcasts are made, it's just hard. It takes a while. And it takes some time to do it effectively and understand your audience, who you're speaking to, and how you can actually connect with that person that you're interviewing with and bring out information that's not relevant for just you,
Mhm.
but for the audience that you're, adhering to.
So true, so true. And I like that you alluded to how you worked with your co-hosts, Reed and Brianna, and it shines through in the entirety of the podcast's episodes in the past year. How all of you have collaborated together. And I would like to know, do you have any thoughts for us as Marie, Melissa, and I continue to work together to shape the next turn of
Yeah.
the podcast?
Make it your own.
Mhm.
I would start with that, is making it your own. Bree, Reed, and I, we all knew each other. We were friends, but we weren't as close as we are now.
Mm.
Now
It
after
brought you together.
Yeah, so and I think that's an important aspect, go grab some drinks with each other or dinner or whatever, and really get to know how people respond to certain things. And that way you could kind of, work as a team for this. In the case of Reed and I, we were lucky enough to where we just realized that we work pretty well together. We're not afraid to have that, radical candor, if you will, of disagreeing
Mhm.
on things, whether it be a topic of, who we're going to interview, questions we're going to say, or things we're going to discuss prior to the interview. We weren't afraid of that. And I think that's a really important component of working as a team, is having those direct conversations and saying, hey, instead of doing this, do this
Mhm.
because of this. And being able to communicate effectively those arguments or those points of view and taking them in is part of teamwork. And, Bree Reed and I were lucky enough where we worked so well together that, we're starting a functional beverage brand.
Wow,
So we'll
amazing.
see if we're, see how it goes. But it all came from this podcast. And again, like, just the communication factor. When you're working together and you're communicating effectively, you start kind of thinking about ideas and things we could do and saying, all right, I know how we can go from 0 to 1. Let's do this. So we're hoping to launch in June for our functional beverage, but it all started in the conference room in August when we started our first podcast.
Wow, amazing. That is to say, the 1000 Ways to Live podcast would have a stake in your business.
Yep. We'll get the LDP team to give the first check.
I know, right? That's so good. Congratulations.
Thank
That
you.
is such a great feat. Wishing all of you the very best, even in this new adventure.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. And as you transition to a new phase, career wise and in other phases of life in
Mhm.
business, what's that one leadership mantra or advice that will stay with you as you go along?
Good question. Let me think about that.
Requires some deep thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go back to that storytelling aspect and how
Mhm.
important that was.
Mhm.
I had a boss that, even, I was 2 years out of college, and, my job was to pitch these large scale energy projects to boards.
Mm.
I would give these presentations and I'd be in, just rural Tennessee or southern Mississippi, just these small little towns. And I remember every single time after the presentation, he'd say, what did you do well? What could you do better?
Mm.
So to me, when I think of leadership, it's not just bringing the people along that are going along, but it's how do you get the others to do better?
Mm.
And making sure you talk to those people
Mhm.
and communicate effectively again and bring it back to here's what you could do better, and making them seem like, that sticks with me. And that's a lot of what we've learned regarding emotional intelligence in school, and being a, effective leader has been bringing people in as a, getting buy-in from all parties. And I think that's a really important component. I wouldn't say that's a mantra at all, but it is a, component that I think about a lot.
So vital, so vital. That ability to bring people in to reflect and identify what one did well, what could have been done better.
Hmm.
That's definitely valuable. It speaks to teachability, ability to learn, and of course, adapt as one goes along. And that's definitely vital for leadership success, both personally and professionally. So, yeah, we would now dive right into the rapid fire section of
Okay.
this interview. And I will ask you a few not so difficult questions.
Okay.
So tell me, who is your favorite leadership model in Owen or outside of Owen in life?
Okay. Could it
Wherever.
be historical too?
Anyone.
Okay. I would say Ernest Shackleton. Have you heard of him?
No, I haven't.
He was the leader on the ship called Endurance that sailed across through the South Pole trying to get to Antarctica, got stuck in the ice for 3 years with 27 of his sailors and got him out
Wow.
safely. Great book.
And
Tell all the audience, read Endurance. It's an incredible book, but it really encompasses all those factors: humility, emotional intelligence, leading from the front, those types of leadership techniques that even though this was in 1914, it's still, is embodied today in some of the best leaders.
Amazing. So tell me, what's your all-time favorite Owen moment?
Oh, um,
I'm sure there must be a lot to pick from.
all time. I got two that I gotta.
Okay.
I'll do it quickly since it's
Okay.
rapid fire. The first is, starting this functional beverage company. I think it was,
Mhm.
to me, going to grad school, going back in the MBA is a huge risk. And part of that risk is I wanted to focus on some entrepreneurial activities,
Mhm.
meet people that are interested in that. And a lot of Owen students, go through the program to de-risk. For me, it was about how can we take a risk?
Mhm.
And uh, that's been probably the most important aspect, is finding people that are interested in taking that risk, launching a product.
And now you're building a unicorn in the making.
I don't know about a unicorn, but it's the first step. We're gonna sell at least one of these things. And the second is Project Pyramid. Project Pyramid, just speaking to the audience here, is sponsored by the Center for Social Ventures. I think are you
Hi.
chair, right?
Executive board chair.
Okay, so you're not okay, so you know way more than I do. But for the audience members who don't know, Project Pyramid is a two mods in the spring, mod 3 and 4, and it's a class in between that, go internationally and work with a social enterprise. So I was lucky enough to go with some of my classmates to Colombia this past spring break for over 10 days and work with a social enterprise nonprofit there. And that's been a great just way to kind of take a step back from MBA program, focusing on, the bottom line and all those things that make businesses more efficient, and really like look at the social aspect. I think that was a really good way to end the MBA program. And that's definitely a defining moment.
Amazing. Love it, love it, love it. I can tell that you thoroughly enjoyed and maximized your time at Owen, because you got value back to back to back to back. That's so good. So, any parting words to listeners, Owen students, Owen alumni, maybe prospective students who are also looking to come to Owen? Any final words to the listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, be curious and focus on your storytelling.
Powerful. Those two key takeaways: curiosity, power of storytelling. As we indeed go along in our leadership journeys, both personally and professionally, we must ensure that we continue to stay true to ourselves as we amplify our stories and amplify others. Till next episode, see you. Thank you so much.